Well, good afternoon and welcome to the homestead. My name is Jonathan. Glad that you had an opportunity to join us for this video. It is a beautiful sunny day in contrast to the last two Thursday afternoons. Considering that it was snowing or sleeting or freezing cold, this seems like paradise. Really thankful for the weather. I'm actually down here in the valley, about, I don't know, I'd say, a good mm, 500 yards or so from the house. And just sitting here in the shade of a couple nice cedar trees, trying to hide out from the sheep. They're up over the hill by the pond over there. I told Casey in the office earlier today, I was kind of hoping to be over by the pond, but I knew that they would start rushing the camera and not have it knocked down in about 10 seconds if I started over by them. Hopefully they won't find me. If they do, I'll jump over here into the truck and go hide, and we'll continue on in there. But I think so far we're in the clear. I'm way down here at the bottom of the valley. There's a gentle breeze. I don't think it will interfere with the sound. If it does, if you will comment and let me know. I know most of you watch after the fact. For some of you, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It's a week later. But if you're watching live, why let me know if the wind starts to give us any kind of any trouble or any issues. Well, tonight I think is a really great video. I've been looking forward to this, not necessarily great because I'm the most wonderful communicator, but great in the sense that I think the topic is one that is extremely relevant for 99.99% of humanity. We're going to be talking about sound money. And sound money is important because money is that very valuable quantity that we trade our time for. And I'm going to talk more about that, what that means in just a little bit. And we're going to be talking about inflation in addition to that, and some strategies that you can use in order to fight back against inflation. It is a very difficult time for many families, especially middle class and families that are below middle class. Because it is very challenging to go to the gas pump and pay $3.30 a gallon for gas, then go to the grocery store and pay 30-40% more than what it's been over the last 2 or 3 years. And that all adds up, and it makes for a paycheck that goes away quick. And so we're going to be talking about some strategies that will help us solve that problem, or at least begin to make a difference or an impact in it while we're in that scenario. And remember, it's not going to be inflationary forever. Things will get caught up. Salaries will get caught up at some point, or we'll switch to a different kind of monetary system. I mean, ultimately, fiat currencies fail. Historically, it has a 100% failure rate. So we know that at some point it's going to transition into something else. And so if it does, then sound money will come back into play again. In fact, we may be on the threshold of a new form of sound money. We'll also be talking about that tonight. Before we get into all of that, I do want to take just a moment to give an update on our friends in Ukraine. I am absolutely overwhelmed by the generosity of people within our church, and even some of you who are outside of our church that have watched this live stream and you said, I want to give, I want to be a part. And so you've sent crypto, or you have given dollars, which we're converting in to USDT stablecoins and sending. We've already sent one payment stream earlier this week, and we're going to be doing that again as more funds roll in and as we wait for the bank to convert that over. So thank you. We've raised over $3,900 for our sister church and sister Christian school in Ukraine, and that is absolutely phenomenal. So one or two more small gifts from this live stream that could come in could put us over the $4,000 mark. So would encourage you to prayerfully consider giving. I had said initially that we were going to be collecting through Sunday night. I had no idea of the response that we're going to receive, that we have received, or that we were going to receive. And so we are continuing to collect funds. So as those come in, we've kind of sent an emergency like right away so they can get food and supplies. So we sent implement that, and then as money comes in, we'll send a few bursts here or there. We're actually using the KuCoin exchange, we're using the Tron 20 network, and we're sending USDT stablecoins for those that care. So it's the fastest and most efficient way to get money there. So we're glad to have that technology and the ability to do that and to respond so quickly. And so that's exciting. What is happening there? Well, I've heard from a couple friends there. One who's just on the outside of Kiev, and of course the bombings have really picked up the last few days, and they are prayerfully considering whether they can stay or not. And then another friend, actually, he sent me. I might try to play it next week. Kind of a sound bite. Who's the director of the Christian school that we're helping send funds to, and he had given me an update as of early Monday morning. They had over 120 people, mostly refugees and other civilians that had been wounded, and some soldiers that had been wounded that they were caring for and treating, or as families were fleeing from the east side of Ukraine to the west side, they were housing them and providing meals for them and just helping them. That's a lot for a small church, small area, and so it's amazing, just the courage, and I mean the fact that they're just there. And I could tell he was tired in his voice, but unwavering that they're going to stay. They're going to be there to help and do what's needed and to take care of their people. And it truly is inspiring. I mean, obviously the news has been covering a lot of what's happening there, so I don't need to give you some large news report, but just a couple personal things for the people that we have been communicating with and giving funds to help, just kind of what's going on there at the ground. And as I get more information, I'll share that. I know that there's a lot of fighting in at least one city that's been overrun to the southeast, and so I would imagine they'll be getting quite a few more refugees coming through today and tomorrow and the next few days as fighting escalates. I would not be surprised to see that number closer to 500, or I mean, who knows, maybe even 1,000. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they would have the resources for that many people, but I know they'll do absolutely the best that they can do, and in a very difficult situation. And I think too, I have talked a lot about Ukrainians. I obviously my heart is stands with them, but I understand the Russian people are suffering a lot of financial difficulty. Banks are closed. There's been runs on banks, and so there's no way to get cash unless you're in some select areas. Visa and Mastercard have shut down credit card activity to Russian citizens, so can't charge on your credit card. So I can imagine if you were unprepared, if you didn't have your beans, bullets, and band-aids, that you are experiencing a lot of distress right now. And grocery stores are out of food in many places, and supplies are hard to get, and the ruble has crashed, and has the value has gone down to the point where very basic things are extraordinarily expensive. So I know that's difficult for them, and I know many Russian citizens are against the war. They're against what is happening to the Ukrainian people, and so I also want to express compassion for them as well, and just praying, and would invite you to pray that somehow God would bring peace, or would somehow use this or use the situation to de-escalate. And as far as the United States is concerned, we've said we will not offer boots on the ground type military support. There has been some discussions about a no-fly zone. And I'll just make a couple comments, because I have had a lot of people asking, well, on both ways, why would the United States consider entering a war against the Russian Federation? And then other people saying, well, why in the world are we letting our friends get crushed at the hands of the Russian Federation, and why don't we get involved? Well, I'll start with the latter first. The biggest dilemma, and when I say this, it's going to sound like I am not in favor of help, and I certainly am. I mean, if I could do something to help more than what I'm already doing, I hope that I would, or I think that I would. The problem is that if we do anything beyond what we've done, so what have we done? We've helped financially, we've supplied weapons, we've supplied medical supplies, we have offered, you know, international support through NATO, through the United Nations, who's condemned um, uh, the actions in of the Russian Federation, notably some notable abstentions, China, but generally most countries coming to support the Ukrainians. So we have done some things, but most, you know, probably if you're kind of a, you live in the heartland of America and you love freedom, and you would say, well, let's, you know, we need to do more. The problem with that is that the next steps, for example, establishing a no-fly zone over Ukraine, that would put American fighter pilots into direct contact with Russian fighter pilots. And that really, I mean, if there's kind, it's kind of a question mark. Has World War III actually started? Some people would say, well, no, because technically we're not at war with Russia, even though, you know, we've done things to punish the Russian government and the Russian people that are so severe that it looks like war over there. And so, but technically, you know, we're probably, it is not the case that World War III has started. But if that were to be the case, if we were just even just to establish a no-fly zone, that really, I mean, there would be very, very few steps. I think that's a Apache helicopter on maneuvers over there. Looks like it, sounds like it. Uh, there would just really be nothing that would, you know, cause an escalation to where then, you know, the Russians would retaliate, and we would retaliate, and we would just be in an all-out war. And the biggest problem, beyond just the terribleness of nations all fighting against each other, like in World War II, which was an absolutely horrible loss of life and property and terrible time of suffering for almost everyone in the entire world, um, the possibility of a nuclear war or nuclear exchange is a really big problem. If we start fighting, two nuclear able nations begin fighting one another. And so that really is the hold up, the problem. I mean, honestly, if it weren't for that, my personal feelings is, hey, we should do something. You know, I'm not necessarily saying we get into a big all out war, but we need to do something to at least protect civilians and to go in and help them escape, help them, you know, have food and safety, and, you know, do something, you know, establishing a no-fly zone or something like that. So that is the dilemma. If you if you're trying to figure out, well, what is the holdup, that is the holdup, and that's a pretty big holdup if you think about it, because um, unlike what the media says, there is a lot of misinformation that a nuclear war is not survivable. I strongly disagree with that. The 1960s version of dropping bombs and launching ICBMs on major cities, that scenario is so preposterously unlikely, that if there is World War III, for it to get to that point, it's unlikely. Even certain leaders now that seem to be, you know, extremely hostile and aggressive are unlikely to get to that point. No one wants to destroy the world except for a select few really crazy, disturbed people. So a nuclear war is survivable, especially if it's tactical nukes, especially if it's nuclear weapons that are used against military installations, which most of them are. There is also a lot of nuclear deterrents, hypersonic missiles, and other interception type missiles that can intercept ICBMs and other nuclear devices that would, you know, prevent them from arming and being deployed. So it is very survivable, and I would encourage you, if you haven't taken time to go through and understand and learn about nuclear preparedness, radiation preparedness, and radiation sickness, you absolutely should do that. We're way beyond the Cuban Missile Crisis as far as the seriousness of the situation, in my opinion. That's not, I'm not saying go panic and run around like a chicken with your head cut off. I'm just saying have some iodine, have some, you know, some ability, some foam or some ability to barricade yourself in an area where you live to where you could survive a day or two and get through the worst of the radiation if we do get into a nuclear exchange. I mean, guys, we're at DEFCON 2, and Russia has put their nuclear forces on the highest state of readiness. So, uh, that, I mean, that obviously is meaningful. So I really would, if hopefully that's kind of common sense, like, yeah, duh, gotcha. So hopefully we've all considered that. But if you haven't, and if you maybe you just kind of involved in other things and focused on other things, you've not been watching the situation, well, then that can be kind of your little reminder of like, hey, it's time to make some preparations. But I realize that most of my audience on Thursday afternoons, you are people that have been a part of PLG or you've participated in Porch Talk before, and you are at least semi prepared to some extent, and you are aware of those preparations that need to be made. And if you're not, go back and watch some of our previous videos, and you can learn a little bit more about that. And or message me and I can give you some resources and talk with you more further about what you need to do to be prepared. And I want to say thank you just real quick before we continue on. I want to say thank you to everybody who has watched and supported Porch Talk this spring. Honestly, if we had 20 or 30, I was going to be really excited. I mean, that's a lot of people watching. So I was going to be super excited. And then after a couple 3 days went by, we had 45, and I was like, wow, that's I'm not sure I'm that worth listening to. And then we had 60, and then we had 70, and I think we had 84 today watch the season premiere, and over 70 last week. So thank you. I feel I'm very humbled by that, and I appreciate you taking the time to help yourself by being prepared and by just kind of engaging in the Christian walk and what it means to be a person of truth, a person of integrity, and what it means to stand up and for what's right in our times. And so good for you. For doing that for yourself and your family, and then also thank you for supporting me and this information that's shared each week. So that's pretty neat. So as we kind of draw a little bit of a conclusion here for this kind of mini update on the situation, um, I think that we just really would really need to understand what we were getting into if we take that next step and understand what as Americans we could potentially be bringing upon us. And I honestly I'm not sure that our civilian population is ready for that. That we there would need to be some communication so that we could understand. And most of those who do understand that lived through World War II, World War I, they have gone on from this world, and so they're not here to share the wisdom and the things that they went through for us. So that's something personally I think would need to happen before we just jump in there. Of course, no one's going to ask me, no one has asked me, and what's going to happen is what's going to happen. But just as far as my thoughts and just kind of looking at and studying the geopolitical situation, that's generally where I believe that it is. If you're maybe on the other side and you're just saying, man, why are we even involved? Why does it matter? Well, the 15-second version, the reason that matters is that Ukraine is a free republic and it's not perfect, just like any other country. I mean, America's supposed to be a republic. We've kind of devolved into something else, but we're still generally a freedom loving people, or at least there's a lot of people here that are. And once we allow those to be crushed by dictators and oligarchs and authoritarian police state type governments, then soon we will be in the minority, and it will be easy for the few of us that remain to be crushed. So there really needs to be a line drawn in the sand to where we say this far and no farther. And so we're kind of, I think, asking ourselves, we as in NATO or the United States, we're saying, okay, how serious is this? And I'm sure that when Hitler invaded Poland, just as the beginning of World War II, very similar, I mean, almost identical situation in most ways that matter. I'm sure that we were in the exact same place, that American civilians weren't ready for a war. We were questioning whether it was important to be involved, that we thought maybe Hitler would just take Poland and then stop and be done and just expand a little bit. Clearly, that ended up not being the case, and Hitler pushed all the way through Western Europe, took France, I mean, just tons of other countries, killed millions of people, particularly Jewish people. And then we got involved later. Too late. And so it is very difficult to know how we should be involved, when we should be involved. And I am in no way condemning or judging anyone, or I'm not even giving our leadership, our president, our Congress a hard time. because those are very difficult questions and they're not simple answers. At least to me, they do not seem simple. And so, what can I do? I am going to pray. I'm going to speak truth to as many people as I can, but also pray for wisdom on those whose opinions do matter and who will be making ultimately those decisions. So, um, if you're listening, you're from Ukraine. We love you. We stand with you. We support you, and may the Lord protect you during this time. Now, not entirely unrelated to what's happening in Eastern Europe, um, the principles of sound money are extremely important. And I had mentioned earlier at the introduction of this video that I believed that sound money is something that we could almost define as the stored time, or the stored value of our time, or what we trade for our time. So depending on what your time's worth, I don't know what that is. If it's $1,000 an hour or $2 an hour, I can't say. But whatever that number is, we invest our time. So we kind of deposit it like in a bank, and then we wait till a later opportunity. Hopefully, we receive money in the meantime, and then later, hopefully, we can spend that money that we've saved if we've invested it wisely, so that we gain back that time. That's a oversimplification, but generally how that works. And so, money matters. Beyond that philosophical explanation, we can look more importantly at the scriptures and see that is the case. And if you have a Bible, if you would, look with me at Genesis chapter 2. That's the first book in the Bible, first book in the Old Testament. And let me just say as a side note, perhaps you're watching today and you're just not really sure about this whole God thing, and you're even less sure about this whole Bible thing. That's okay. If you would, read along with us and let's explore that. And you can be going on that journey of determining for yourself what you believe about the Bible. I do believe that it is the inerrant, inspired Word of God, and that ultimate truth is found here. And so for me, it is a valuable place to glean information and from which to form a theology, a philosophy, an understanding of how the world works, and how we should live within it. So I'm going to do the same thing here on my iPad, and I'm going to read beginning let's skip down, let's say verse 8. Now, what's happened so far, because we don't have enough time to read the whole first chapter, but God's created everything. He's said that it's good. All right, and so remember that. That's really important. He created the world, and at that point, now this is before Adam and Eve sinned, so he said it was good. And he created man, and then from man he created woman, and he said that it was good, and he gave Adam and Eve instructions over the garden, and that they were to take care of it, and he just created this incredible creation. And even at this time, this idea of sound money was being established. And the case that I would want to make to you is that it is actually God's idea to have this type of commodity trade, so that that our time has something that is very powerful, and that we can store that time in the form of some type of currency, and then we can later use that currency in order to gain that time back, and to be able to do the things that we do the things with our time that we may not want to do, and then later we can do the things with our time that we want to, again, if we invest it wisely. If not, we're always going to be a slave, giving up our time because we are investing unwisely. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit, because if you're wondering, well, what does it mean to invest unwisely? Well, don't worry, we'll cover that. So it says, the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he placed the man he had formed. And the Lord God caused the man to grow out of the ground every tree pleasing in appearance and good for food, including the tree of life in the middle of the garden, as well as the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river went out from Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided and became the source of 4 rivers. The name of the first is Pishon, which flows through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. Gold from that land is pure. Bdellium and onyx are also there. And so we can see here that in creation, as God created all things, he identified some specific things that we would adopt as sound money. Now, if you're listening to this and you like to think ahead, good for you. I think that's a great thing to do. But what you may be saying is, oh no, here we go. This is going to be, he's a gold bug. This is going to be all about that. Well, I do think that there are commodities that have value, stored value, and that they would qualify as sound money. All right, but they go beyond gold, and I'm going to be making a case for that a little bit later in the video. So please don't stereotype me right off the bat. Um, Gold is representative of those things that have true value. All right, so when we discuss this and we're talking about sound money, we're talking about things that aren't just, you know, created and imaginary, or based on what somebody says or thinks, or there needs to be a utility case. There needs to be something that can be done, that there needs to be a rareness, something that where it just can't be reproduced or printed endlessly. And so that is the distinction of what sound money is. If I just said, this sage is worth $1,000, where there's really no utility, or there's no case that I can make that makes it true, right? That's just what I'm saying. So my point being that is foolishness to make those statements, and foolishly, as people, we do that, and we place a value, we exchange our time foolishly for things that are not sound money, and we get ourselves into trouble, and we also violate scripture. We're going to talk about that too in a little bit more. So we've kind of established for ourselves, at least so far, that it is the case that God has created the garden. He set man to work it, and woman, and he has established some specific things. And actually, beyond just money, let me just identify a couple other things. He also noticed that he talks about water. And think about how valuable water is. Water is what keeps us alive. I mean, you can't survive very long without it. I mean, a week or two without water and you're dead. Our bodies are made up of primarily water. I can't remember exactly the percentage from anatomy and physiology. So, you anatomy and physiology experts can maybe comment on that. But I want to say it's 70-ish, 70 something percent, maybe. Fact check me on that. Ask the Google on that. But it's a large part of us. So water is a key thing, and I think it's interesting that in creation we've established water where it is, that it's moving water, so it's fresh water. It can be consumed, and so I find that fascinating. And then also, land is mentioned as well. So we have gold, or precious metals, gems, and then we have water, and then we have land, which gives us the opportunity for prosperity. Because notice the garden, what was it composed of? Land, right? So that's an important part of the discussion too, because beyond just sound money, there are other elements that are key, crucial elements that on a daily basis, maybe even on an hourly basis, those are things that we need. I mean, you can't just you gotta be able to work somewhere or live somewhere, and you gotta have land to do that. And of course, if you follow the land market, the real estate market, it is just uh, it is very expensive to own land. Now, I want you to pause for a minute and think about the statement that I just made. Has the land changed at all? Nope. But the dollar has declined significantly, and that makes it seem like land costs more. So notice that, don't be deceived by that. Land is land. The land that you see behind me has the same value today as it had 1,000 years ago. And so now I know, I guess, in terms of development and that kind of thing, well, that changes the value. But as far as the dirt itself and what it can produce, what its utility is, it hasn't changed in 1,000 years. There was probably some kind of animal that roamed across it then, and there's many animals that roam across it now. But what's changed is the dollar has declined substantially, And so then it costs more dollars. And so if you've stored your time in a dollar, well, then now you've just thrown your time away. Now, if you're saying, well, hey, wait a minute, I didn't throw it away. I thought I was storing it. And so we're going to talk about how we can store our time in something that's a little bit more sound. And that, that sounds a little harsh, like I'm just poo-pooing the dollar, and I'm not by any means. In its original form, the dollar was actually backed by precious metals. It was called the silver dollar because it was backed by silver and gold. And now it is no longer, as of the 1970s, it is no longer. And so it's not necessarily backed by anything of substance. Now, you might say, well, it's backed by the word of the U.S. government. Okay, for what that's worth, that does have some value. Then it can be a store of value in that sense. But are there better stores of value that we can save our time in? That's what we're going to explore a little bit more this evening. Now, before we move on with that, I want us to talk for a little bit about inflation. Now, one of the things that we said several years ago when we first started these discussions is we identified that there was trouble on the horizon and that inflation was going to be a problem. There's a lot of reasons for that, but most simply because the dollar is not tied to anything uh, solid or tangible, you can just, the person in power, which is the Fed generally, can just print as many dollars and loan out as much imaginary dollars as it wants to do. And it can just do that endlessly. In fact, today I heard there's another $32 billion that is being asked for, which is going to be imaginary money that just comes out of nowhere, comes from the printing presses that will help us pay for stuff, COVID stuff. I said the C word. I shouldn't have done that. Things for possible war in Ukraine and other things. So I'm not saying those things are bad. I'm just saying we're spending money we don't have, and that is probably not good. And at the very best, it causes all the dollars that do exist to become worth less. And that's ultimately what inflation is. Inflation is a hidden tax, and you pay that tax. This last year it was 7.5%. So whatever you earned, whatever you already paid in taxes, you paid another 7.5% on top of that. And so that is basically how it works, and it's hidden, and we get those numbers, that 7.5%. We get that from the CPI, which is a number of that smart people spend a lot of time assessing. And I know we could argue that all day long, that it's higher, that it's lower. Yes, we could argue that. I'm going to let you guys do that outside of this video. We'll just go with that number. I want to be a generous person. I know that standing up in front, it's easy for people to take pot shots at you and to criticize you. So I'm going to try to not do that, whether to any leader, whether it's a leader I agree with or not. I want to be generous. I want people to treat me with generosity, so I'm going to try to treat them with generosity. So we'll just go with that number, give or take. If you feel like it's more like 10 or 15%, why you go with that, you use that for your calculations. If you feel like it's more like 4 or 5%, you're probably not correct, but I love you anyway, and you just go with that. So those are the numbers. That is the rate at which the dollar is declining, or if you want to say it more dramatically, collapsing. And that number has kind of been going down, and now it's really, we can say it is accelerating on its way down. So that's a problem. Now, obviously, the ruble is experiencing that on steroids, and I mean, it is just going straight down. And that's why you see so many people panic buying Bitcoin, panic buying Ethereum, panic buying Avalanche. I mean, just about every crypto out there, because it is outside of that printing press problem. That is probably, if people ask, well, what is the advantage of Bitcoin, or what is the advantage of a blockchain currency? I don't really like the word cryptocurrency because it's not really what it is, but that's what people understand when when we talk about it. But it's really those blockchain network currencies. Those cannot be easily created. There's a cost to print, to mine, or to create the computer network that those transactions are built upon, and operating systems to which that they use that network to communicate, and so that is the utility of it, and so therefore it has an innate value, and so people are grabbing onto that as they recognize that fiat currencies are collapsing. And I think if anything else for us tonight in terms of inflation, so we are discussing sound money, but as we look specifically at inflation, that's one of the biggest tools that you have to fight inflation. And I am gonna give you the, you know, 7 things you can do right now. So I'm gonna do that. But I just want to say generally, before, if you can't memorize the list, then just think about it. If you have, this grass that I claimed had value, and now it seems to not have any value, then what is the logical thing to do? Well, stop playing with the grass. Grab a hold of some metal. Okay, here's some metal. I don't know if this is aluminum or what it is. I know there's silicon and gallium arsenide probably inside of this somewhere, and some cobalt and lithium iron phosphate. So it has inherent value and utility. So I'm going to grab that and maybe not do so much with the sage, which has not a lot of value. It does look pretty in the fall when you set out straw on your porch. So there you go. All right, so it's just the idea of abandoning something that doesn't store your time well and grabbing a hold of something that does. All right, so that's kind of the idea. Am I saying that gold and Bitcoin are the only things that have value? By no means, right? There are many things. If you store up, well, obviously toilet paper, we've all established, the world's established how valuable that is, but even less exciting things like toothpaste, soap, candles, gas, food in your pantry. I mean, those things all have value, and they are all stored time as well. Because you can grab a can of peas and you don't have to go out and grow those peas. So that is stored time, all the time growing that somebody has spent growing and harvesting those peas. Now you're just going to grab it off in a can off the shelf, open it up, and cook it. Or if you don't have the ability and you're in a war torn area, you can just open that thing up and go and start eating those peas, and you're not too particular about how they're cooked, and I'm the first person to whine about, oh, this wasn't seasoned or it was, get all into that, and probably that's a little bit uh, superfluous. So what matters is that those peas have calories, and those calories will keep you alive. So that is stored time, and there is value in that can of peas. But we can't all just carry around a pantry worth of food and be like, oh, hey, I want to buy some gas, so here's a 50-pound sack of flour. Well, that's why the barter system has some limitations, and so we need something that's more dense, that has utility, that we can move around. Gold is great in some of that sense, but then what happens if somebody punches you in the face and takes your gold? Well, you don't have it anymore, because possession is 9/10 of the law. So that is a problem, and so that's why we need some type of currency, some type of a store of value that goes with us, that's very light, that you could take $1 million worth, or you could take $1 worth and transact in it and be able to use it wherever you go. And that is sound money. In fact, let me just read. I checked to actually get the definition of sound money, and it is as follows: money that has purchasing power determined by markets and independent of governments. All right, so think about that. So if a government controls it, guess what it by default is not? It is not sound money. All right, so I want you to just let that sink in for a little bit. In fact, I've said this many times, I'm not going to go through an explanation, you can Google this, but if you look at a dollar bill or $100 bill, it even says that it's not money. It says it's legal tender, and it says that it's a note. And so it's basically debt. It's just an instrument of debt. It doesn't have any inherent value. The government borrowed money to pay for whatever, and they gave you a debt note and said, okay, here you go. And that's where the rub is, right? Because we have a lot of even prominent Christian leaders touting, holding dollars or other fiat currencies. And that is actually the opposite of what the Bible is telling us, because the Bible is telling us we need to have sound money. Now, am I saying that if you have dollars that you're just a big wicked sinner? By no means. That is not what I'm saying at all. I have dollars uh, right now in my truck, probably for emergency, $20 for lunch. I have money in my wallet. I have money in the bank. Hopefully, it's still there. And it's in dollars, actual dollars, not just stable coins, but U.S. dollars. So if you're a sinner, I am too. I'm not saying anybody is. I'm just saying that you don't want to use that as your premier primary store of value, because as we have already, I think, pretty unequivocally established, it's not a store of value. And so we need to seek out something that is, and we have been. I mean, I think people ever since 1970, when we went off the gold standard, where there was a certain amount of gold that backed up the US dollar, we've been looking for that. And as the dollar has really, has lost its value over that time, we've been trying to find something tangible that we can transact in, that is practical, and that has utility. And so that's the struggle that we have. So let's talk about the 7 ways to, I don't know what you want to call it, overcome inflation, battle inflation, survive inflation, adapt to inflation. These are the 7 things that you can do right now. Number one, uh, wait on capital purchases, or at least don't get in a big hurry to go out and buy whatever it is. All right. Particularly luxury items, for a lot of reasons. First of all, if you'll recall, 2 years ago, whenever we were almost in a deflationary situation and we saw that inflation was on the horizon, I was saying the absolute opposite. I was saying, buy it now, get it now. This is your last time to get it. This is the time if you need a new washer and dryer, if you need a new car, I mean, do it. And hopefully you did, because you paid about half as much as you're going to pay for a car now. Because, wow, I mean, a really piece of junk car costs a lot of money. It is just insane. So, and I shouldn't laugh, because that's a serious struggle that I know many of you have. I know my children have struggled to find a quality vehicle for a reasonable price. It's just actually not even a quest that's probably possible. So this is now the opposite of that. Because inflation has occurred, it's actually a very expensive time to buy things, because you're going to pay high price when wages are lower. Because eventually, hopefully, unless we have hyperinflation, the salaries will rise, and that will meet the level of inflation. So then that percentage will drop and go back down to 2, 3, 4%. And that's a lot more manageable. It's still not ideal. I mean, sound money should not have any inflation, right? It should actually gain in value over time. All right. And think about that. Okay. So what has been gaining in value? Well, land. Okay. Water. Okay. Because I paid at Sonic today, I paid 15 cents for a free water that's not free anymore. Okay. And cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin. I mean, it doesn't matter what currency you look at: Ethereum, Avalanche, Phantom, Bitcoin itself, XLM, XRP. Those have all gone up dramatically since their beginning. All right. The opposite of fiat currencies, dollars, yen. And, it sounds like I'm hammering on the dollar. I'm talking about dollars, euros, rubles, yuan, whatever. You pick the fiat currency. If the government controls it and it's not backed by anything, then that is what I'm talking about. It will ultimately go to zero or near zero in value. It's just a mathematical time period. All right. And that sounds, that can sound controversial. I mean, 5 years ago, that was really controversial. I think the world has pretty well accepted Bitcoin as a store of value, as money at this point. But there's still a lot of people that are kind of waking up to it. And I think this whole Russian Ukraine thing has really helped people understand how portable it is, how quickly and easily and that it can be distributed, how governments can't really punish it or sanction it, or change it or change its value to benefit them. So it's more impartial. So it can benefit Ukrainians, it can benefit Russians, it can benefit everyone outside of that scenario, because it's a real store of value, and that you can move money from one place to the next, and it's you can count on it having utility because there's miners who are working in server stations that are working to make those transactions, and they're getting paid to do that in that currency, and then they're providing their service, their power, their energy that is a cost for them in order to cause those transactions. So we can look at that and begin to build a case for it as sound money, along with other things. All right, so number two on inflation, debt is shrinking and property value is going up. So move down, but don't move up. All right, so what does that mean? So this is a great time if you are maybe a little bit older than me. You're in your 50s, 60s, your kids have grown up, they've left the nest, you have a bigger house than you need, and you're thinking, man, this house is worth twice, three times what I paid to build it. Or if you just bought a house that was already built, then what you paid for it when you purchased it. And it is a great time to downsize because you're going to be selling a higher priced item at that higher price, right? But you're going to be purchasing a lower priced item at that higher price. So it is an advantage to you because now you can store those extra funds and use them for retirement or as an investment in whatever, or to travel or do some things that you've wanted to do. In other words, you're going to begin to get your time back out of that store. And so this is a great time to do that. It is, and then of course the opposite would be true. It's not the best time to, or it is a very challenging time to move upwards, because even though you're going to sell for a great price a smaller property, now you're going to pay a really large premium price for a more expensive property. Now, there are some caveats to that. The first one is sometimes you just don't have a choice. If your job changes or something happens, you got to move. Well, it is what it is, and you just have to, take your medicine, the medicine, and swallow it and get better. That's just what happens. So it's not like it's the end of the world if you have to do that. I'm just saying if you have a choice and you're just kind of thinking about being a good steward, then this would be the best decision if that decision is possible for you. And of course, there are other elements. Things could change. A lot of people think that housing's in a bubble and it's going to come back down. Um, that's not likely, and just about every journal article I've read would dispute that. And the main reason is that inflation is rising to meet that price of real estate. That's the difference. When we had the 0809 thing, inflation did not rise to meet housing prices. And so housing prices collapsed and came back down to reality. And then they moved back up with the natural inflation. But now inflation has just been turbocharged. And so real estate prices are, while there maybe be a little bit ahead of inflation, honestly, they're not super ahead. So if there is a pullback, it's not going to probably be significant. That 3-bedroom house that used to cost $80,000, that now costs $150,000, well, that's just how much it costs now. And so, unfortunately, there's just not a lot you can do about it, except don't store your money in dollars. Don't trade your time for fiat currencies. Invested in something tangible, like land, like water, apparently, like Bitcoin, like gold, something that historically has risen in value. It's not rocket science. You look at the thing and say, has this gone up or down in value? And if it's gone up, then you'd say, well, that has, that must have some utility. That must have something that is significant. If it's consistently gone down in value, then you could probably say, yeah, there's something wrong with this as a store of value, because now I have less of it. If I had 100 units and now this year I only have 92.5 units, well, there's something inherently wrong with that. And the Bible is very clear that we are, as stewards, we are to bring a return on our investment. And that, so that the time that we store it should actually gain a return, not a decline. And if you are not familiar with Matthew chapter 25, verse 14, pause this video and go check that out, because the parable of the talents is a powerful, powerful story that helps us understand our responsibility as stewards of God's money, that we are to make sound investments. Now, it can sound like, and I think for some people, you might think about certain financial assets as gambling. All right. And so let's address that issue for a minute before we go on with our other items. if you're just going down to the slot machine, or if you're just randomly buying slots, or frankly even cryptocurrencies, and you don't know what you're doing, and especially, I'm not saying meme coins are bad at all right, I know that there are millionaires out there that have a lot more, many times my net worth, that made that from meme coins. All right. So I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying, don't just buy something. Understand the asset that you were investing in. That's really important. Warren Buffett, I think, is the one who really teaches that lesson probably the best. So don't just go gamble on, oh, I like Apple, or I like, Dogecoin, or I like, whatever. Those are, those have utility, real utility. So make sure you understand, though, that it's the right time, that why you're doing it, what your time horizon of investment is. If you're just trying to make a quick buck, you're probably going to lose a quick buck. The only way to truly build wealth, and I know there are exceptions to this, and I know that nobody wants to hear this, and probably half the viewers are going to sign off when I say this, but growing your wealth slowly is the best way. And just besides the fact that that's just naturally how it should be, because you're slowly trading your time investment for some kind of an asset, you need time to develop the maturity to handle that, right? For some of us, the worst thing that could possibly happen is someone just drops $10 million in our lap. Well, we could really mess our lives up pretty fast with that. So, by earning slowly and developing wealth gradually and slowly, we're also developing the spiritual disciplines along with that, that will help us use that wisely and shrewdly, right? Because you've seen billionaires that are just wasting their time on women and drugs and all kinds of things. But you've seen billionaires who are making the world a better place. People like Elon Musk, that are in developing technologies to help people, to provide services for people. And so you got to decide what kind of a human being you are. Are you the kind of human being who is going to benefit others? You're going to be faithful in your tithing, faithful in supporting those in need, and taking care of the orphans and widows, and doing all the things that the Bible commands us to do? Or are you just going to be selfish and let your wealth be all about you? And I'm going to check I'm out here on everything's on batteries out here. So I'm going to check. Okay, we're good. We got battery. Thank goodness for these really nice lithium ion batteries that Samsung's put in their phones. So, so that's important, I think, for us to understand, and to not just have a gambling mindset, but to do our due diligence, understand whether we're purchasing land, whether we're purchasing blockchain, whether we're going to stake or mine blockchain currencies, which is a whole nother thing. It's kind of like the old CDs. Used to, you could, even when I was a young man, I could take my money, I could my dollars, put them in the bank, and get 5, 6, 7% return, which of course, you can do with, that would be a low return for most cryptocurrencies. Now you can't do that because the debt burden is so bad on fiat currencies. Well, you get 0.00134 or whatever, this tiny number. You need a magnifying glass to look on your bank statement to see that it's negative, because if you're losing 7.5% and you're getting plus 0.0012%, well, again, it's not rocket science to understand you're losing money. So it's important for us to not beat each other up, get mad at each other, get crazy and try to get rich quick, or just try to respond in some strange way, but just to sit down at the table, examine the situation, establish and understand what sound money is, establish those things that we believe are the best stores of value, and to begin to responsibly, not gambling, not getting excited, I want to, get rich quick, not panicking buying anything, but just to begin to say, okay, Lord, help me understand what is sound money, what is appreciating in value, what can I wisely invest my time, the money that I have earned for the time that I have invested, and be that good servant that earns a reward or earns a return, versus the wicked servant who's just losing money. All right. So it's I know that was a lot of things that I just kind of assaulted you with, but that's hopefully kind of a powerful 5 sentences all compressed there, that will help you maybe not get way off into one of these corners, and just obsess about one thing. Because truly, I mean, no matter how good we might feel an asset or a store value is, we probably need to be more moderate in our, placement and have some land, have some cryptocurrencies, have some fiat. You still need some fiat currencies because most of items are priced still, even though more and more things are priced in Bitcoin. But there are most things still priced in U.S. dollars or priced in euros or priced in a government currency, and so we have to convert that store of value over. And so it's good to have all of those things. And one of the struggles, I mean, it sounds like I'm just pro Bitcoin. I told you what the shortcomings of gold were. Well, here's a huge shortcoming of Bitcoin: the price versus fiat currency fluctuates wildly. I mean, just last year alone, we've been between $30,000 and $70,000 just on Bitcoin. Well, one of the stipulations for sound money is that it has to have a consistent value, and so that is a really wild fluctuation. And so that's a problem. Now I realize it's in its infancy, and so you have a lot of people speculating on it, and the world is trying to decide what it's going to adopt, whether it's going to adopt Bitcoin, Ethereum, Avalanche, or some combination of all of those blockchains. So while we're in that, that people are speculating and it's pushing the price like crazy, and you have people mining, and then some countries banishing the miners, and they go to another country and then they mine again, and so there's a lot of chaos. So that's one reason right there that you don't want to just be like, oh yeah, okay, well I'm just going to sell all my possessions and buy Bitcoin. Well, that creates its own set of problems. Again, that's why we have to understand what sound money is, understand the advantages and disadvantages of all of those different asset classes, and then invest wisely, like the wise servant and not the wicked servant. All right. I think you guys have got that point. I hammered that pretty well. Okay. Or I don't know if I hammered it well, but I hammered it hard. How about that? Okay. Next, number 3. This is a great time to start a business. And you're saying, what? The world is in chaos. This is the time to start a business. This is a great time because there's somewhat of a reset happening. You get a little bit of that kind of financial reset to where we're establishing now what kind of the new range of values of different things are, whether it's real estate, whether it's fiat, whether it's whatever asset it is. And so there are a lot of businesses that have gone out, unfortunately, because of all of the disruptions in the supply chain, and people have just been discouraged and they've given up. But there are new technologies, new opportunities, new ways to provide services to people, and it's a great time to start a business whenever you have periods of inflation. One of those reasons, especially if you're going to have to borrow a lot of money to start that business, well, then it's not ideal because interest rates are getting ready to really start to climb, and so you may be paying a premium on borrowed money. So if that is kind of your plan, it's probably not the greatest time. But if you have stored a good portion of funds and you've kind of had this dream of starting a business, this can be a great time to do that because you're going to have the opportunity, perhaps because of these supply shortages and because of some of the disruptions, to find an area where there is need and provide value for that need and be able to have an opportunity to start a business. So this is be a great time, even though it seems a little scary. Some of the most wealthy businessmen were made during these large transitions. We're transitioning from kind of the industrial era into the information age. And the information age, which a lot of people have said, well, we've been there. And that's true. But guys, I'm telling you what, it is going to really accelerate. I mean, just think about how cell phones have changed the world, internet has changed the world, metaverse is coming, and it is going to change the world even more significantly and dramatically than those two things. And those were huge changes. So there's a lot of opportunity. So consider if this would be a good time to start a business. Number 4, invest in commodities, in value companies. So if we're going to talk about stocks specifically for a minute, I am not a stock broker. This is not financial advice. Do your own diligence. I'm just making some observations and things about the market. Right now, growth is being punished. So if you are PayPal, DocuSign, Tesla, Apple, whatever, well, actually, Apple's is more of a value company now, and Microsoft. They used to be kind of that techie company now. They're just kind of the old school, but still make a good product. Those are the kind of companies that have actual earnings, positive earnings, not negative earnings, that have low PE ratios, profit to earnings ratios, that have growing sales. Those are the kinds of companies that are going to do well. That along with commodities, just because as fiat currencies go down, then iron ore, aluminum, uranium, whatever it is, those are going to go up against those currencies. So those are things that you want to begin to dollar cost average into and invest in. It's a great time to be in those. It's time to watch growth. Growth has been hammered really hard, and there may be some growth plays. Um, I'm not going to throw out what I think those are, but this is a time to just kind of watch it and begin to say, have we gotten to a bottom? I'm not sure we have, but that bottom's coming eventually. I mean, once inflation peaks and begins coming down the other way, you'll see growth. It'll have another bull run. But it's probably a little bit premature because we don't know where this war situation is going. We don't know how bad inflation is going to get. Are we going to hit 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15%? We don't know. We don't know where it's going to peak, where it's going to come down, how much the Fed is going to be able to battle inflation. I mean, part of the problem with the Fed right now is that they can't really raise rates too high in the face of the war situation, but they've also need to be raising them because inflation is getting out of control. So they're in a difficult spot where they may have to force stagflation, which is kind of like the pit of despond. I mean, it just sucks you in slowly because you can't really fix inflation. You can't really fix the problem with rising costs, and but you can't raise rates to fix that, and you're just kind of stuck at somewhere in the middle. It's kind of like being in trench warfare and no one ever wins, or being in a stalemate. So that is the problem with that. How can you overcome it? Own things that have real tangible value, or companies that have real earnings, positive earnings. Not I'll make money in 10 years, but I made money last year, I'm going to make money this year. Those are the type of commodities and companies that have value to invest in. Okay, which is basically like starting a business. If you're not, some people are, I think, just called to start businesses, or they have that ability to do that, and other people just don't. And you know what? That's fine. There's one is not better than the other. You can buy shares in businesses, people that are fantastic CEOs that are running these companies, fantastic companies. You can own a piece of that. That's why they're stocks, so that you can own a business in part without having to run that business. So basically the same thing, but we don't tend to think of it as the same thing. So I separated it out for clarity. All right, next item. Number 5, avoid low interest long-term bonds. Now, it's probably kind of obvious, but when a bond is paying 2% and there's 7.5% inflation, I mean, it's basically just like holding a dollar bill, right? You know that bill is going to decline. As long as bond yields are low like this, then you're going to lose money. The only thing that could change is if bonds rise and you're able to sell that bond. Well, then you can make some money on it. But unless you're really a savvy bond trader, then that's probably not a great. Bonds is not the worst investment you could be in, but probably down there somewhere among the worst. Okay. Number 6, don't spend money before you get it. Now, honestly, this should be a rule and a principle that we live by anyway. Money is mentioned in the Bible over 800 times in a positive sense, generally. But debt is mentioned not that many times, but a lot of times, and almost always in a negative sense, right? And that's basically what debt is. Debt is just buying something you don't have the money to pay for it, okay? And you can, there you don't have to think about what is money. You can just, it doesn't matter whether you're talking bullets, Bitcoin, or dollar bills. You can't, if you don't have any of those things, well, then you can't just, you can go out and buy it, but you should not go out and buy it. So this would be a terrible time to get yourself in a more indebted or in an indebted place, because while it is true that inflation will decrease the value of debt over time, The squeeze that you experience in spending power can put you at risk to where your debt level crushes you, especially if incomes are slow to rise to meet inflation. Your debt can crush you and put you in a very difficult place. You can risk foreclosure on your home. You can risk losing your vehicle if you borrowed money on your vehicle. You can really get yourself in trouble during these times, especially if there's stagflation, because that debt is not going to diminish in value as quickly as it would in just in a high inflationary situation. So it is always, I think, probably a good rule of thumb not to um, buy something before you get paid for it. But this idea of kind of getting like a payday loan, or just like, oh, hey, I know I'm getting this raise, or oh, the paycheck's coming, let's go ahead and, go out to eat tonight, or let's take this vacation. Wait until you have secured that sound money, because things are very volatile, and I would not count on anything. I mean, there's an old saying: "A bird in hand is worth two in the bush," and I would say that during an inflationary situation, that is especially true. That you want to make sure and just wait patiently, whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year extra for whatever it is. Don't just go out there and live on hope and a prayer that it's all going to work out, because that is not a godly attitude. A lot of people confuse faith and belief and trusting God with hope and gambling, and those are completely contrast with one another. All right, now hear me. I know this is hard, because a lot of people go out, charge $5,000 on their credit card that they can't pay back, and then they start praying, oh God, pay my credit card bill, oh help me, I'm in need, I need money, I need help, I can't pay my credit card bill, I can't pay my house bill. Guys, let's think about that. You put yourself in that situation. If God bails you out of that, all he's doing is teaching you to keep sinning, right? So I know that that's hard, and a lot of this is hard. I mean, if probably of all of the videos on Thursday afternoons that you just would like to reach into that phone and just grab my hair and just throw me down on the ground and just kick me, and just kick the dog while he's down. I get it. I understand it. I am just trying to share the truth with you. I am not better. I'm not higher. I'm just saying, like, here's what God says, here's what the Bible says, here's what is reasonable and rational. And even though I know it is contradictory to what the world teaches us to do, there is blessing in it and there is joy in it. And if you have to suffer through the consequences of going into debt, that is a good thing. All right. And you're saying, well, you've clearly never gone through those consequences. I promise you I have. I have bought stupid things that I didn't need, that I had to then not get things I really did need. And I don't know, suffering is a relative term, but I went through a hardship because of that poor decision. So I do understand that. And I've learned the hard way, but also because I've had wise advisors in my life. And so I'm thankful for that. But I've also learned some the hard way, that not to get in that situation in the first place, right? If I don't have money to go to Olive Garden, then I eat ramen noodles, right? It's just kind of simple. Like if I've budgeted my money, which I believe you should have a spending plan, have a personal budget. So if I have laid out, uh, that I have $7 available for dinner, can I eat at Olive Garden for $7? No, I cannot eat at Olive Garden for $7. So I go and find food that I can eat for $7. But then I put into place a plan so that at some point I can eat at Olive Garden, because I really like breadsticks. All right. Hopefully you got that. So that's hard. I know that you feel like I'm just punching you in the face. I hope what I'm doing is I'm reaching out a helping hand, and I'm saying, hey, here's a way for you to invest wisely and to protect yourself from harm, right? So, what is the point of all of that? Don't spend money before you receive it. All right. And lastly, number 7, last but not least, um, you need to have some extra cushion, an extra layer of protection to pay taxes. All right, taxes are going to rise. I Do not care if there is a Republican or Democrat calling the shots. It is a mathematical guarantee that taxes are going to rise, right? Either the hidden tax of inflation or the overt, honest tax of government collecting money on from us for things that it wants to do, right? So you're going to need some extra money. So whatever you think you need for taxes, all this helicopter money and such, which I do think is not over. I do think there is going to likely be some form of universal basic income that comes up, but we're not going to get into that tonight. For now, for the time being, for the next year or two, you're going to need some extra money for taxes because the free money is going to have to get reined in a little bit, one way or the other. And it's either going to not get reined in and we're going to pay it through inflation, or it will get reined in and we're going to pay it in taxes because we have got to do something about the 30 plus trillion dollars of debt that the US government has now taken on. And of course, they take it on and then they sign all of our names as guarantors of that debt, which is so nice. I really love it when that happens. All right, so you need that extra cushion. So if let's say you have your spending plan and you've got your tithe, you've got your housing allowance, you've got your vehicle allowance, you've got your entertainment or fun money, you've got whatever it is, kids college, all the things you have, you probably need an extra 2, 3, 4, 5% to put in that emergency fund so that you, when the time comes and then it's like, oh, I didn't get that child tax credit, or oh man, I now that my income's gone up a few dollars an hour because of inflation and because of the labor shortage, now I've got to pay that extra tax, and so you're going to need a little bit extra for that. All right, so those are the 7 things that you can do right now to combat, let's say it that way, to combat inflation. All right, now shifting kind of back, which I realize we're kind of on the same path, but shifting now to focus on sound money from inflation. I think inflation, and the reason why I made it a part of this is number one, I know a lot of you just like those, here's the quick list of things I can do. You just kind of like fast forward through the rest of the video, but you want those 5 things, like here's the 5 things I can do right now. So we've got that. But also, inflation helps us understand what sound money is, right? Because if, for example, if fiat currency, if the U.S. government said today, like, hey, you know what, we realized inflation is a problem. We're going to balance the budget. We're going to stop printing money, and we're going to back every dollar with some Bitcoin or with some gold, or even something, with, I don't know, with peanuts or walnuts. I mean, just something tangible. Well, then we could say, okay, a $1 is worth this. It's worth a handful of walnuts, right? We would have something clear that we could base it on. All right. So the problem isn't necessarily, the government having a currency. The problem is them having the ability to basically manipulate what the value is, right? That's what makes its population poor, is its ability to do that. So sound money prevents that from happening. And so I've made some cases, I've kind of obviously dropped some hints, like big hints, like, okay, what is not sound money? So let's take just a moment now and let's just zero in, because blockchain currency, it's a new thing. And some of you are like, you could tell me, I mean, you could tell me all about it. You could comment all the things I said wrong about it. I am not an expert, and I know it is much more technical than the conversation we're going to have tonight. So just as a businessman, as a pastor, as a farmer, as somebody who deals a lot with money, because that's just kind of my life is like that. When you run a farm, when you own a business, when you have a lot of kids in college, when you are, involved with the stewardship ministry in a church, then that's something you deal with a lot. So I'm not saying I'm the brightest ever or an expert. I'm not saying though I'm, have no information about it. So I'm going to try to share some of that information, and let's just have an honest discussion, right? Let's put all the politics aside. Let's put all the preconceptions aside. I mean, I honestly, on videos like this, I've hated on Bitcoin, right? Because I, first of all, didn't understand. I thought it was magic internet money, which magic internet money really has no value, because magic anything is imaginary, I think. So what is it? That's the big question. So what is, let's answer the question tonight. If you survived this far into the video, what is Bitcoin? All right. Bitcoin is a computer network that was invented by a brilliant individual who created in and programmed into this network, into this blockchain. It's called a blockchain because it's made up of these little blocks, network blocks that build up a long chain of blocks, a way, and with a limited number. So there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. There's like 18, I think, million in existence now that have been mined. And don't worry about mining, those are all misnomers. There is no mining. No one has a pickaxe and is mining Bitcoin, right? That's all talk. Cryptocurrency is just talk that doesn't have anything to do with what it is. But Bitcoin is a blockchain technology. It is a computer network that is created by computers that are networked together. And so let's say that I want to send you a Bitcoin, right? So when that happens, it takes the Bitcoin that I have, which is a physical thing that exists on a wallet, a digital wallet somewhere, all right, just kind of like a digital dollar or digital anything. And if I send that to you, then the computer network has to make so many transactions, like 24 or 32 transactions, I can't, however many it is. I can't remember how many it is. And so you have 24 different computers and they all process that transaction. Then if there's agreement, or called consensus, it's called a consensus mechanism. If there's agreement, then that transaction is complete. If there's not agreement, then they keep trying that until there is agreement, right? So because if there's an error somewhere, it gets corrected by all the other things. Accountability is a wonderful thing. Now, it's peerless. It doesn't require any kind of a central command structure because all of those computers are who have no authority by themselves. They are in through this consensus mechanism. They are agreeing that that transaction is complete, right? So that is the advantage. It has a limited supply. It has actual utility. It can be instantaneous. So anywhere that there's internet access, basically, and now that we have Starlink, I mean, there's pretty well internet access anywhere once the satellite constellations are complete. I mean, anybody anywhere on the planet can get internet, and it's going to be even cheaper than it is now. So that is a requirement. So if you live in the mountains where there's no internet, well, then Bitcoin's not going to be a good store of value for you if you plan on never leaving the mountains. So you're going to be a lot better off with kerosene and wood and those kind of basic commodities, food, growing your food. So that is basically, now Bitcoin is one form of blockchain. So think, how I think of it is there's dollars, euros, yen. They all have different value, different utility. They tend to be based on countries that are either strong in oil, mining, service, technology. So they're different. And that's how cryptocurrencies or blockchain currencies are. So Ethereum has value because it's one of the largest, it's called the ERC20 network. It has one of the largest utilities where people are building applications on top of it. So think of it like you have Apple, you have Mac OS, or you have Windows. And so then people build applications on top of it, like you build Word or you build Keynote on top of that operating system, right? So Ethereum is the operating system. And so like that Keynote or that Word, well, that would be something like an NFT or like a game like just Centraland, or like a banking system type of network like PayPal. So you would have different applications on top of that operating system. So that is why it has utility. That is why it has a store of value. So it's not just magical internet money. And so then the market decides, because notice in our definition, it says that the market has to determine what the purchasing power is. So then based on its utility, based on the value of those applications, just like you would pay whatever it is, I think it's $100 a year now to get like the Word, the Microsoft Office package, right? And so you used to buy it for like 400, then you had it for life. Now you can just pay an annual price and just get the newest version. All right, so the same idea. So the market is deciding what the value is. People either pay that or they don't, and Microsoft lowers or raises its prices because the market decides. So the same thing, the market, and that's why the price fluctuates so much, generally always going up, but it fluctuates because the market is deciding what the actual value is. And that's a good sign. That's a sign of a free market. That's a sign that the market is determining based on its real value what it's worth. And so that's important. So if you're kind of wondering, and I may have lost some of you guys in there, I tried to make that as plain as I can. But if you're wondering, well, what is Bitcoin? That is basically what it is. So you can imagine why it's so fast is because it's just electronic. So just like you would send an email and it would go anywhere in the world in a second, so does that currency. And it's not expensive because a bank or a company or there's no one that can create a profit margin. It doesn't need a profit margin. It just needs the little bit of cost of those transaction confirmations. And then if it's a not proof of stake, proof of work currency, then you would take that proof of work currency and you would develop it or mine it, add it to the network, and then you would get paid for your services. Just like if I was a contractor, I'm building a building, I would get paid to build that building. That's basically what mining is, all right, which not important. We're not going to get into that tonight. So, what problems does it solve? Well, we discussed how quick it is, how inexpensive it is to move. You don't have to, and how you don't have to wait for central governing authorities. It's also autonomous, so it's outside of you can't really get sanctioned by it. And I'm not right now. Sanctions are helpful, so I'm not attacking sanctions. But what if all of a sudden we're not the big kid on the block? Now we're getting sanctioned. Or what if you live in America and you have certain beliefs that the government doesn't like? Well, they can punish you by taking away your rights and liberties, your financial rights and liberties. Well, if you have money that is inside that system, you will get punished. If you have money that is outside of that system, then you just will have to geographically leave that area, but then you can go and have access to that money. So, we have funds on 3 different exchanges. So, and they're all in different places in the world. One's in America, I think one's in Singapore, one's in Taiwan. So I can go anywhere in the world. If I was in London right now, if I was in Sydney, Australia right now, and I wanted to pull out my Coinbase card, which is a Visa card, and it transacts anything that I have, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Avalanche, whatever, into whatever currency that is, which I know you're thinking 30 years ago when I was traveling, I wish I had that. Then it will convert that. It will convert my Bitcoin so I can pay virtually anything anywhere in the world in any currency with Bitcoin. And that is what makes it an amazing advantage. Because if I just have dollars, well, now I've got to convert those dollars over and I got to go and pay a large fee because, everybody likes their nice little fee to convert it over. And now I'm buying it in pounds or grivnas or whatever the currency pesos is of that country. So it's something that can be used very easily and quickly in different places, and I can move geographically around, and I'm not locked into a certain currency. So those are the problems that it solved. And of course, the biggest problem is that value, that store of value, is not declining because there is a limited quantity and it has real utility. So nobody can just make more Bitcoins. Nobody can just come up with just magically print like we do with fiat currencies or dollars or yens or whatever. Again, not hating on the dollar. Nobody can just print it out of. Truly, it is imaginary money. The way that we go into debt and we create money that doesn't exist, that truly is imaginary money. So what we need, and maybe somebody will develop another currency system that's even better than Bitcoin. Hey, that would be awesome. So I'm not, locked into it forever. Like it's the only thing and it's the future and there will never be anything else. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that my experience after using it for a couple years now has been very positive, that it has held its value while other things have not held their value. And it has caused me to be able to bring a return and be a faithful servant rather than lose money as a wicked servant. So I want to share that information with you. What do you think about that? What do you believe about sound money? What are some of the advantages that you see or disadvantages that you see? That's all valuable. Feel free to comment or send me a message, or I would love to learn more. If you're a expert on anything, I'd love to hear from you. And because really, we're just talking, We're just trying to understand. The world is changing so fast. It's so hard to understand what in the world is going on. I mean, this is so much to me like the dawn of the internet, and people either just loved the internet or they hated the internet. And millions of talking heads on TV were just, oh, the internet's so bad. It's the biggest waste of time. 10 years from now, there will be no internet. It's just a fad. It's dumb. It's a waste of money. We heard all those things, and here we are just 20 years later, and the world runs on the internet. I mean, there are things you can do without the internet, but there are a lot of things that require almost now the internet. So what I'm suggesting tonight is that Bitcoin and other new technologies like it, electronic vehicles is another one, for example. The metaverse is another example, or Web 3.0, as some people call it. Those changes are coming. God's not surprised by any of it. And in fact, his principles, they apply to all of those things, just like they applied to the invention of the telephone and the dawn of the internet age. They apply to Bitcoin and the metaverse and all the other things that are coming. And what our responsibility is, I believe, is to be faithful and wise and shrewd and to stand firm on the truth and on what we believe through all of the fluff, all of the media coverage, all of the just all the fake news, all of the true news, all of the gossip, all the social media, all the things, all the information that is out there. We've got to pick and choose selectively and with wisdom what is correct and what is incorrect. And that's really these porch talks on Thursday afternoon. I mean, that's really what it's about, is just trying to address those issues, even the hard ones like this that I know can be tough, that can be challenging. You probably feel like if you don't have Bitcoin and you're in debt, and I don't know, I probably hate it on you, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I love all of you. I mean, that is what we're commanded to do, to love our neighbor. And just as you would try to help me, if you had the ability to do that, that is what I'm trying to do. I just want to help you in any way that I have the ability to help and to share. And that is part of my calling as a pastor, I believe, is just to share truth, is just to share information. And if I find out later that I was wrong, well, that's okay. I learned from that failure. If I find out later that I chose wisely, well, then I understand what was correct about that decision. That's why last week we did our assessments in our video. And if you haven't gotten a chance to go back and see it, I'll encourage you to do that, because we kind of assessed, like in 2020, in spring 2020, what did we predict? How did we prepare? And what was good about it? What was bad about it? And that just helps us learn for the future how we can do better. And I think that's part of growing spiritually, is that we have less sin in our lives, and we have more goodness, more godliness in our lives after learning from the failures of sin. And so I hope this has been great. We're out of time. I'm going to wrap it up. I hope this has been great information for you. I hope it's caused you to think. Maybe it's just challenged you a little bit. You're just like, wow, that was a lot. Send me a message. I'd be happy to clarify anything, or just help answer any questions that you might have. We will be talking about experiencing momentum again this upcoming Sunday. We're going to be talking about the 4 roadblocks to experiencing momentum. So I would invite you to come if you would like. If you're not already a part of our church family, come to River Bluff Fellowship in Ozark, Missouri on Sunday at 9:30 a.m. And there's all the information on our website and Facebook, where you can get information about our church and check out our Sunday sermons and things. So I look forward to seeing you guys on Sunday. I am praying for and would invite you once again to join me in praying for our brothers, our sisters, our friends, our family members, that are our spiritual family members who live in Ukraine and in the Russian Federation, particularly those citizens that are just victims of what their government is doing. Let's pray for them. Let's pray for the situation, for the world, as we are in a very precarious situation. It is a very dangerous situation, but it's time to be prepared and not scared. So remember, the Bible says that God's not given us a spirit of fear. So if you've gone through this hour and 29 minutes and your heart's beating fast and you're just full of anxiety, well, then the enemy is got a grip on you that you want to try to just let go of. Just be at peace. Hopefully, this information is freeing. And while it can cause us, dealing with reality can be unpleasant, it can also be very freeing in the sense that we can cast our burdens on Christ, who's commanded us to cast our burdens on Him. And that's how we are prepared and not scared. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Hope you have an absolutely fantastic and blessed rest of the week. The weather, if you're living here in the Midwest of the United States, it's going to be beautiful the next couple days. So enjoy that, a break from the winter cold, and we'll see you guys next Thursday afternoon at 3:30. Thanks a lot. We'll see you soon.